So there's some interesting stories about why we say Amen at the end of prayers, or why I say we collectively as people who are under the umbrella of Abrahamic religions. If I've been binge watching videos by Billy Carson from Forbidden Knowledge lately because they're really intriguing to me, and I like the work that he's doing, the extensive research and going into history, ancient documents, specifically the Sumerian tablets. And one of the things that he talks about I find very interesting. And so this I'm calling the right-hand path of Amun-Ra is correct. And so you'll see what I mean by that in a moment. The right-hand path of Amun-Ra is correct. And so one of the things that I've heard Billy Carson from Forbidden Knowledge talking about was how the God Amun-Ra is also the Yahweh of the Bible, who's this evil tyrant and does all these crazy things, who may also be Enlil from the Sumerian tablets. And, you know, he's Enlil, and I think that's the brother of Enki, and they've got Marduk as one of their children, and Nergal and all that. It's a very interesting stories. And one of the things Billy Carson has said is that Amen-Ra decreed it or commanded that people say his name as a form of worship at the end of the prayers. Now, back in 1998, I had read a book, or the book was published in 1998. I believe that I got my hands on it probably maybe 10 years later. I'm not exactly sure. I wonder if I look on my site if I'll find it. That's not important right now. But the book was from 1998. I know that I had published something called Orgasms of the Gods on March 3rd, 2014 on my website, hypnoathletics.com. So it was between that time. It was 1998 to 2013 when I had got that book. I'm not exactly sure now, but I'm sure if I mine my website for content, I'll see when I did. But the point about it is that there's an interesting story about where Amen at the end of prayers may come from. And I actually got someone really got very upset with me at a gathering I was with at an Israeli friend's house, and I told the story about how people are saying the name of an Egyptian sun god at the end of their prayers, and this guy also from Israel said, "Who told you that? Who told you that was true?" And he really, he looked like he was about to get violent, and I just backed down and said, it's no big deal. I forget what I said, but I know that I just took myself out of that situation because people apparently get really sensitive about stuff like that. So in the book by Ralph Ellis, it's called Jesus, Last of the Pharaohs, and what's interesting now is you can probably see the sun is on my face here. That's west. The sun is setting right now. It's 18:18. We're 18 minutes after 6 in the evening right now, so I'm facing south. Now, one of the other things that Billy Carson talks about, and this is why there's some similar connections here, and a lot of stuff he's saying brings back to mind a lot of the research and reading that I've done, is one that Moses may also be the Pharaoh Akhenaten. Well, Ralph Ellis, who wrote the book called Jesus, Last of the Pharaohs, say that Aaron of the Bible, who's Moses' brother, may actually be Akhenaten, and Moses was a high priest, and that's why Moses was able to beat him up and drag him around by the hair, because only a high priest could do that to a pharaoh. So there's a little bit of some different interpretations there of who Akhenaten really may have been. But remember, the book is called Jesus, Last of the Pharaohs, and so it was saying that Jesus was also a king. Maybe some references to the crown of thorns stuff and everything like that. But really, what's really interesting about that is that there are a lot of connections that can be made by different researchers when you actually start looking at the text and interpreting. And it's the reason why I also wrote the blog called Orgasms of the Gods, because it was one of the first times I really started more seriously digging into these linguistic translations and interpretations of older texts. One of the first times was when a friend, Amit Sharabi, who is also Israeli, he told me that by simply changing the spacing, not the order of the letters in the Hebrew alphabet at the beginning of the translation of Genesis, it changes the meaning. From in the beginning I created the sky and the earth, something like that, to you are sky and you are earth. And he simply said by changing the spacing between the characters, not the order of them. So I find that interesting. However, the thing about what I'm saying is that the right-hand path of Amun-Ra is correct is a little hint into the meaning here. So one of the things that's known about the Pharaoh Akhenaten, whether or not that was Moses or Aaron, is that one thing that the various different researchers, interpreters, and translators can agree on is that Akhenaten took his people to the middle of the desert, away from where they were, where it was really dry, to a place called Amarna. And I believe Amarna, I think he called it Akhetaten, which means a place that is worthy of the Aten. And his name Akhenaten was also meaning one who worships the Aten, or something like that. And actually, his original name was... his original name was Amenhotep. I think it was Amenhotep III. I'm not sure, but I can look that up. And I will do that in a second, as well as going into my website as well. So let's see. Akhenaten was Amenhotep. Wow, it said mountain was a hotel. The Pharaoh Akhenaten was Amenhotep. Okay, well, let's see. All right, we'll get to that in a second. But, hold on, I gotta take off this. It's connected to this. Okay, so that's better. Hopefully my sound is not coming through there anymore. So, Akhenaten was originally Amenhotep, and that's very important here in these translations, as well as also something I learned by visiting a mosque, which is the place of worship for Muslims here in Virginia, which is called Crescent Community Center, and it also gave me some more insight into this learning that I got these many years ago. It's at least been 10 years. And it's simply that in Egypt, when they worshipped, many of them, they were facing south, which is as I am now. And so when you're facing south, the east is no longer on your right-hand side. Most people orient themselves to their north is in front of them, and the south is behind them, and east is to their right, and west is to their left. Well, in this facing south, the east would now be on the left, and the west, which is what's happening now, the sun set, is on the right. Okay, and so that's again a clue as to what this is called here, that the right-hand path of Amun-Ra is correct. So now Akhenaten, he takes his people to Amarna. It's the middle of the desert, and he's one of these people who first started to implement monotheism. So instead of having all these different gods of nature, one is of the Nile and the abyss, and one is of the sky, and one is of the wind, and this, he decided that he wanted to monotheize the worship and bring it to one. So let's think about it like this. Since I am facing south right now, what would happen is, and now a little bit, this is my interpretation, but it's going to make sense and it helps to understand this here as well, is that when the sun was rising, right, it was the Aten Ra. So the rising sun is where the Aten comes from, right? So it's Aten Ra, on the rising on the left. And then in the middle of the day, it was the Noon Ra or Nun Ra, which is where I think we get the word nun or noon from. Again, these are my interpretations, my intuitions about it. So noon is the midday, noon Ra, Nun Ra, right? And then the setting sun is the Amen or Amun Ra, right? So that's on the right-hand side when it sets. But a lot of people didn't agree with what Akhenaten wanted to do with the monotheism, and also the fact that the conditions in Amarna in the middle of the desert away from the Nile and from everything else is probably pretty harsh. So eventually, these people turned on him, and it's, for some reason, they didn't want to just have this monotheism of just the Aten, right? So the Aten Ra, which is what he was saying is the one true God, is the one that's represented by the rising sun. Whereas I think that because the Aten, Noon or Nun Ra, and then Amun Ra, because Amun was at the end of the day, it completed the circuit. I feel like maybe they felt like they wanted to worship all of them, not just one, but they felt like maybe Amen Ra was the greatest. But he got kicked out of Amarna, or out of his city Akhenaten, and his wife and his son are also somewhat famous in their own way. His wife was Nefertiti, and their son was Tutankhamun, or he would have been if he would have kept his name as Amenhotep III. But his name was Tutankhaten, which we know as King Tut. And remember, the Aten is the rising sun on the left-hand side, the Noon Ra is the midday sun, and the Amen Ra is the setting sun on the right-hand side. Again, clues again and again of why I'm saying this clever title of that the right-hand path of Amen Ra is correct. So then what happens is that they get kicked out. Him and Nefertiti get kicked out, but they keep King Tut, King Tutankhaten, on the throne, and eventually name him Tutankhamun, which most people know him as. And so they defeated them, they overthrew them. Maybe there were spies on the inside, the people who wanted to worship the Amen, and that specific aspect of the setting sun that set on the right-hand side. So from that time forward, everything that was seen as bad or evil or incorrect was on the left-hand side, the rising sun, the Aten, right? And everything that was seen to be on the right, the setting sun, on the right-hand side was correct. And this is interesting linguistically as well, because you also see that this has also carried over into modern English, whereas, as we know, correct, the word rect means right, as in a rectangle. Rectangle means right angle. And so from that moment on, the Aten, or the left-hand side, became the bad, evil, and incorrect, whereas because the people won, the Ammonites, everything that was seen on the right-hand side was correct, which is why we also have the direction is right, but also meaning correct is right. See, that carries over into modern English, and then also in a lot of other languages as well. And so I'm going to do something I haven't done before now that it has come to me here, which is to see, I'm going to go to Google Translate and see if these translations go to Arabic and Hebrew as well. So let me see. I'm going to translate here. So let's see. I'm going to look at the languages. I'm going to search language. Let me go to Hebrew first. So Hebrew, and then I'm going to put the word correct in here. And okay, so I don't see. Alright, so correct. Alright, and let's see what it says here. I don't see it making a sound. Let's see.
Correct.
But what is the Hebrew? Let's see. Let me see if I can do this. Okay. It's not giving me a Hebrew translation for here? Because I'm hoping it's something like Yamin or Amina, right? Well, I can see the Aleph there, so but right. Oh, well, that's interesting. Okay, so look what happened here. I'm gonna cancel this out. So what I'm gonna do here is first thing I'm gonna put in is the word correct. Right, so I put in correct, and it gives me these translations here, right? But look what happens when I switch it. Interesting. It's into the English, right? It changes it to right, right? Interesting. So the same word for correct is also right, like I was saying. I wonder if that would be the same if we go to Arabic. So Arabic, done. Let's go to Arabic. Okay. So now I'm going to type in correct again here. All right. And it puts this word sahi. Let's see what this sounds like.
صحيح.
All right, but let's see if I switch it again, what it does. Oops. I'm gonna go here, correct. Okay. All right, so that one doesn't translate over there. Let me see. Yamin. Amina. All right, so, but we have that in English, it translates over, and we saw in the Hebrew, it also translates that right and correct are the same. So some other interesting things that go along with that is that you may know, you've seen a person animated going through some kind of like moral or ethical struggle, then the devil is on their left shoulder and the angel is on their right shoulder, right? So that's interesting. Devil on the left, angel on the right. Remember, Aten Ra, who lost, is the rising sun on the left-hand side. The Ammonites, Amen Ra, who won, is on the right-hand side and correct, right? So there's one interesting connection to that too that might help solve that mystery of partly where that comes from, of the devil on the left and the angel on the right could be linked to Akhenaten in Amarna and him losing and being wrong or incorrect, right, because of the Aten and that monotheistic idea. But then the people who won, the Ammonites, Amen Ra, being on the right-hand side and correct. And then finally, just something was really interesting when I was visiting the Crescent Community Center in Virginia, which I said is a mosque, and it's a Muslim place of worship. I was talking to one of the imams there, and he was talking to me about something very similar, how that on the right and left shoulder is supposedly where different aspects of Allah would speak to you and give you different advice. So that's just a little something that I found interesting, that it crosses over into the different languages and cultures, which were very closely connected. So that is why the right-hand path of Amun-Ra is correct. It simply may be an explanation for why we say Amen at the end of prayers. Or when I say we, I'm simply saying that rhetorically, for meaning people who pray and say things at the end of prayers, because really the name of that Egyptian sun god, maybe even older Sumerian god, is been turned into not only the name of that sun god, but it is in that language, the ancient Egyptian, and at least we saw from the translations I was putting into the Hebrew, it means the same word now as correct, as well as the direction. So not only does it mean the direction right, which is actually west when a person is facing south, as I am now, right, right, but it's not only a direction, as far as if you're oriented facing south, to your right-hand side of your body, it would be west, right? But it also means correct. So it's a direction and it's an affirmation. So just like we have in English and also in Hebrew, at least. So that's very interesting there, as I showed that in the ancient Egyptian, in the Hebrew, and in English, the word that is the right-hand side, which is literally the setting sun aspect of the sun god, Amen Ra, is also correct, as well as the direction right, which is also would be west if you're facing south. So that is the right-hand path of Amun Ra is correct.